Weird Tales. Stories from Japan's ancient Kaidanshu. On a skull that was saved from being stepped on by men and beasts, showing an extraordinary sign and repaying the benefactor immediately. Translated from the Nihon Ryoki from about the 13th year of Konen, 822 CE. There was a temple in Nara Prefecture called Kankoji, where a monk named Doto lived. He had come from Koma Province, modern-day northern Chosen Peninsula, and was a tender-hearted and compassionate person. He noted one day that travelers had difficulty crossing the Uji River due to lack of a bridge, and so he supplied the funds from his personal savings to build a bridge for everyone's use. Acts such as this earned Doto the respect and honor of everyone who knew him. One day, Doto was walking through the valley of Mount Nara with his disciple Maro. Quite by accident, Doto saw a skull on the wayside that had tumbled down from somewhere. The skull seemed to have had a hard time. It was covered in mud and looked like it had been kicked around by travelers on the road. There was little meat left clinging to the bone, and then only in small places. Doto felt sorry for the poor skull and commanded Maro to take the skull high up into a tree where he covered it with some branches to keep it hidden. This happened on the evening of the closing of the year, on New Year's. Soon after, a man appeared before the gates of Kankoji. "I have humbly come down from the mountains with a request to see the one they called Maro. Could you please bring me before him?" The man was infallibly polite in his greeting and manners, and so the young monk tending the gate guided him to Maro. His face had an odd familiarity about it. "I am deeply indebted to you," the man said. "You have done me a tremendous service, and I would like to return your generosity. Although I have brought nothing with me now, I beg of you to return with me to my home so that I may properly repay you." There was nothing for Maro to do except to accompany the man past the temple gates. After a long trek through the mountains, they arrived at the man's house. Maro was presented with a dazzling feast. "Please, please, take only your favorites, and lots of them, please." While saying this, the strange man began to enthusiastically gorge himself and encourage Maro to do the same. Maro still wondered what he had done to deserve such rich rewards. When he asked the man how exactly he had been of service, the man silenced Maro's questions by shoving delicious delicacies at him. Maro, still a young man and given to worldly pleasures, was unable to resist. Never in his life had Maro tasted such delicious foods. Between the two of them, empty plates piled up like a mountain range. Thinking it was time to relax, he was startled as he saw the man's face suddenly turn a violent shade. "Honored Maro, my brother who murdered me has just arrived. There is no time to hesitate. We must flee. Come with me." Hearing this, Maro was shocked out of his pleasant repose and asked what he meant. His voice trembling, the man answered, "Many years ago, my brother and I had a business together, and from this I was able to save 40 kin of silver, about 18 kilograms. My brother himself saved nothing. He thought it easier to just kill me and steal my silver. For the longest time, my body rotted in the forest until nothing was left of me but my skull. People walking along the road who saw me would only kick my skull out of the way, like an inconvenience. It was terrible. Then, beyond all hope, you came along and lifted me up from the dirt and saved me from my fate. I thought about how I could possibly repay such kindness, so I came to your temple this evening to invite you to my house for this feast. At that time, the man's mother and elder brother entered the room. Seeing Maro, they shouted in fear. Maro explained how he came to be there and retold the story he had just learned. The mother listened intently to Maro's story, and then looked down at her eldest son and told him in her strictest voice, "You killed my beloved boy. It was not someone else's doing?" She then directed Maro to eat and drink even more as thanks. With the feast done, Maro returned to his temple and reported what had happened to his master. So you see, even a spirit of the dead or a bit of bone lying in the street can repay such an act of kindness. How can a person still living forget their spiritual debts? How a man's wife became a vengeful spirit, and how her malignity was diverted by a master of divination. Translated from Konjaku Moto Naragarishu. A man had abandoned his wife of many years for no particular reason. Perhaps he had simply gotten bored of her. In any case, he left his house to go adventuring, leaving the poor woman to waste away and die in their former home. In death, however, the stubborn woman refused to leave. Her bones stayed together, and her long black hair only grew longer. At night, strange lights and sounds would come from the house, prompting neighbors to summon a master of divination to help them. The master told the villagers that she was waiting for her husband's return. As soon as possible, the husband was brought back to the village. During the day, the husband entered the house, sat astride his wife's body like a horse, and held onto her hair like reins. At nightfall, the body came to life and tried to buck the man off, but he held on tightly, and they flew out of the window and rode roughshod over the entire countryside. When dawn finally came, the husband still clung tightly. The wife was overthrown, and her bones disintegrated to dust, leaving the husband undamaged. So they say. How Tosuki Kai's meeting with a ghost woman in Mino province ended in his death. Translated from Konjaku Moto Naragarishu. Tosuki Kai was traveling to his estate in Mino province. While crossing the Sita Bridge, he encountered a woman in a kimono who asked him to deliver a small box to a lady who sat at the bridge at Kara village. Tosuki agreed and was warned not to open the box. On his trip, Tosuki forgot about the box and instead brought it home to Mino and placed it in his storeroom. His wife, jealous in nature, thought it was a gift from a lover and opened the box secretly. The box was full of gouged out eyes and sliced off penises. Tosuki, being alerted by his wife to the nature of the box, immediately went to the Kara village to deliver it. When Tosuki met the lady on the bridge, she was outraged that he and his wife had looked into the box, and he died as soon as he got home. So they say. The Yurai wife who came to bear a child. Translated from Inga Monogatari. In Yamagata, in East Ashishumogami, there lived a man named Reido. He had abandoned his wife in Kyoto in order to become a merchant in Yamagata. But to his surprise, one day his wife from Kyoto appeared on his doorstep. Reido divorced his new wife he had in Yamagata and soon was living happily with his wife from Kyoto. She bore him a single child. One day, business took him back to Kyoto, where he paid a visit to his old household and his father-in-law. The man was surprised to see Reido and sadly informed him that the wife he had abandoned had died 3 years ago. Hearing this, Reido replied vehemently, "What nonsense! Your daughter has been living with me in Yamagata these past 3 years. We have raised a fine son together, and she is healthy and strong." The old man was shocked beyond belief and immediately accompanied Reido back to Yamagata to see his daughter. However, when he rushed into her room, he found only her mortuary tablet inscribed with her posthumous Buddhist name. They returned to Kyoto to open her grave and found that she had a lock of her child's hair clutched in her bony fist. They thought she must have been pregnant when he abandoned her, and she died those 3 years ago. The Yurai wife came to Yamagata to give birth to her baby and spent 3 years suckling him. Reido admitted that he had thought it was strange that he had abandoned his wife when she was 17, but she still looked 17 3 years later. On cutting a spider's leg during a game of Haku Monogatari Kaidankai, translated from Tonogizuwa. The brave young men had gathered together for a single purpose. Tonight, we will exchange 100 stories and see if the legends are true. See if something terrifying awaits us at the end. They were ardent tellers of tales. As the night passed, they soon arrived at the closing of the 99th weird story. The room was thick with anticipation. "Let us not be impatient," said one of the men. "A drink and some food together before the final tale is told." All in agreement, they produced lacquered boxes packed tight with delicacies. These were shared among the intimate gathering. They sat in a circle, enjoying the brief respite. Without warning, a great hand appeared on the ceiling. It appeared to stretch wide, reaching its fingers out in a colossal grasp. The frightened men were bowled over at the sight, except for a single stalwart who sprang to action. With a flick of his wrist, his sword flew from its sheath and struck at the hand. However, much to everyone's surprise, instead of a giant finger, the sword sliced off a spider's leg about 3 inches in length. One of the men chuckled. "I guess this was a true test of courage after all." As for the spider, it appeared to be of the variety known as the orb-spinning spider. It would flatter it too much to call it a Yoro spider, Yoroguma. Its color was not right to call it an earth spider, Tsuchigumo. But it was no common pit spider, Anagumo, either. After all, in its web, it had killed a giant weevil, so it must have had a dreadful poison. But its color was blue-green, like the kind of insect that could disappear between blades of grass. Perhaps it was a sea spider, blown here by the ocean breeze that carried it far from its home, floating in the air as if on the waves. It is pitiable, this spider carried so far from its home, trying to make do on its new environment, spinning a web on unknown surfaces. We should admire its perseverance. It was only sitting there, sleeping in the summer heat, never asking for the intrusion of these storytellers. And here was its fine work undone. Our own fine work is made of individual threads that can be pulled apart. We can be killed on the street walking home, joining Yorimitsu in the spirit realms. Or maybe tomorrow will come. It is not for us to decide.